Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the June edition of the Great Lakes Urban Lunch and Learn. I want to thank you for being with us today. I'm super happy to be hosting an August panel and to learn from this conversation. As you know, Great Lakes Urban, we connect people in community to build strong neighborhoods and thriving cities. We really do think that neighborhoods are a key unit of change toward that vision. And so that's why I'm so excited to have with us here today some leaders in the Roselawn and Bond Hill neighborhoods who have made significant and transformative change where they live, work, and play. I want to say a few things as your moderator with today's conversation. A conversation does feel more like a conversation if you're able to see all the folks, all the panelists on your screen at a time. So the way you can do that, if you go up to the top right of your screen, there's a little section that says an icon that says view, and you can click on that and click gallery view. And that's a way that you can have all of us up there at the same time. Another point of these conversations is that we will invite you to have provide us some questions, at a Q&A point toward the end of this conversation. So be thinking about what conversations you have for our panelists, and you can drop those in. If you hover again over your screen toward the bottom, you'll see where there's an icon that says Q&A. Drop your questions there, or if you drop it in the chat, we'll find it and answer it that way as well. Finally, you're going to hear us talk a lot about asset-based community development. And you'll hear us a lot of times use the shortened acronym ABCD. So just so you know briefly what we're talking about, this is about people living in local places and taking responsibility for each other and their local resources. It's very much an asset-based, community-driven, inside-out, relationally focused, and inclusion-centered methodology. With that, I do want to introduce our panelists for today's conversation. Joining us will be Reverend Lynch III, a pastor of 31 years in the Roselawn neighborhood with New Prospect Baptist Church. Also an author of Becoming Joshua, A Path to Economic Freedom. It's available online. You can do a Google search and you'll get to that. Highly recommend it. Pastor Lynch is also an award winner for several awards, including Man of Honor. And he's the co-founder of the Community Economic Advancement Initiative there in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a founding faculty member of the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, or ABCD Institute, at DePaul University. We also have joining with us Amber J. Twitty. And Amber is a Cincinnati-based extension educator for Central State University. Also a business owner. She's a management professional who's worked in all aspects of community development, planning, and workforce development to help people move toward thriving. Amber's a graduate of Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, with a focus on business finance from the College of Business. And then finally, we have with us Jean Ellington. Pastor Ellington has a master's in public administration from Xavier University, is the president of Ellington Management Services, Inc., and he's actively involved in increasing opportunities for minority businesses. He also serves as president of the Cincinnati chapter of the Collective Empowerment Group, CEG, and board member of the Community Economic Advancement Initiative. With those brief bios that just summarize a few of the high points of a long list of accomplishments for our three panelists, I want to turn it over to you three. And I want to invite you to fill in the blanks. Is there anything in your biography to bring forward that I didn't capture well? And then also, if we move from Pastor Lynch to Jean to Amber, maybe you could also give us a little biography of the Roselawn and then the Bond Hill neighborhoods, just so we have a sense of the context you're working in as we move forward through this discussion. Pastor Lynch, would you be willing to start us off?
Sure, Eric, thank you for this opportunity. And it's good always to see Amber and Jean, and just met Sarah. and any who are out watching and listening today. So yeah, you said, do we add to the bio? Of course. I actually hate bios. I do. I hate introductions. I hate bios because there's no way a bio is going to capture the real essence of the person and the work that they've done. But I've been pastoring a church in Cincinnati for 32 years. This week coming up actually is my 32nd year. For the first 23 years, my church was in a community called Over the Rhine. So if anybody's familiar with Cincinnati, Over the Rhine is right outside the downtown of our city. And like most cities, downtown is vibrant. Cincinnati's downtown houses Fortune 500 companies. The largest grocery store chain in the country is headquartered in Cincinnati. But you would cross a double yellow line from downtown and all the wealth into the poorest community in Cincinnati at that time, which is Over the Rhine. And so for the first 23 years of my ministry, that's where God placed me. During the height of the crack cocaine epidemic, I watched people die on the streets. But I was dedicated to rebuilding that community for the people. And so we ended up purchasing an entire city block. We built businesses on that block. And we had a vibrant church. We eventually outgrew the area and moved to where we are now, Roselawn, but Over the Rhine changed. I started as the president of the Cincinnati Black United Front after we had our 15th police shooting of a Black male in our city in a short period of time, which happened in Over the Rhine. There were 3 days of civil unrest in Over the Rhine. And so our group with others filed a class action lawsuit against the city. But we decided to mediate the action. We decided to do what we called a collaborative agreement. We brought everybody to the table, the union, the brass, the city, ourselves, and the feds. The federal government came in as well. And we hammered out an agreement that made policing better in the city of Cincinnati, which is an agreement now that we've taken around the country. It's an agreement that if you read the judge's order in New York to stop, and frisk, he mentions our agreement 3 times in that order. So we're extremely proud of that. But while we were fighting to change policing, there were other people who were planning and plotting to take the community, to take the land. And that's exactly what happened. So while we won an agreement and we changed policing, we lost an entire community. The people that I fell in love with in Over the Rhine are no longer there. The businesses are no longer there. It's now sushi bars, microbreweries, and a whole different demographic. So there was a learning lesson there. There was a learning lesson. You have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You just can't focus on the issue that you're focused on and the fight that you're fighting and not realize that there's an economic reality to that. And sadly, what we saw in Over the Rhine, we also saw in Ferguson, we saw in Los Angeles, in Baltimore, in the communities that were hurting the most, where there was police brutality, civil unrest. At the end of the day, years later, those communities were changed, but not for the people who live there. So now in Roselawn, our fight is if the community is going to change, it must change for the people who live there. It must change. And if there's going to be economic vitality, the people who live there have to be engaged and involved and owners. So I'll say this one more thing and I'll stop. So you mentioned becoming Joshua. Becoming Joshua was my realization that I didn't have to be Moses all the time. You know, I started my ministry wanting to be Moses, deliver my people, you know, tell Pharaoh, go down to City Hall, let my people go. Great, and somebody should do that, and I enjoy that role. But at some point, there has to be the Joshua who follows Moses. And Joshua's charge was be strong and courageous and possess the land. Be strong, courageous, possess the land, and build. So I realized that at some point you have to leave the Moses narrative and somebody has to pick up the Joshua narrative. And we decided to do that. And so Gene and others, that's what we're doing here in the city of Cincinnati.
That's great. Great segue, Gene. If you want to come in and share what's missing in that bio that I started with, and a little bit about the character of Roselawn and Bond Hill.
Well, I too, like Damon, I hate bios, and I try to tell people to make them as short as possible. The other thing that was excluded from my bio, I've been pastoring for 17 years too, in the community of College Hill, but I also become victim to Damon's visions. I no longer serve on the enrolled as a board member to CEAI. I am now president and chief executive officer for that organization. We have very similar passions about what needs to happen in the African American community. I am a recovering social worker, and I understood a long time ago that social services will not deliver people from poverty, from sickness, from lack of education. In and of itself, we need an economic engine that will help facilitate that kind of transformation. And so we've been serving here primarily in the Bond Hill Roselawn area, but not exclusively in the Bond Hill Roselawn area. And so we have a lot of different economic opportunities that we are either participating in or creating so that we can elevate people, not only their existence, but their thinking about possessing the land. And our goal here is to do development without displacement. As Damon just mentioned, what happened in Over the Rhine, and it's happening in other African-American communities in the city as well, is that there are developers, and some of them are government-funded developers that are moving people out of communities that they live in and that they love. And so our focus is to do development without displacement and to value the assets that currently exist in our community and build upon them. So our glass view is always half full as opposed to being half empty.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Amber, do you want to add anything? And then we'll get started with some questions. And it looks like you're on mute.
How do I follow behind those two preachers? Excuse my voice, but just to piggyback on what they said, it's all about ownership. It's about having access and knowing that you have a voice. So learning from these two, the whole time I've been I've known both of them since I was little, been around them, seen them. I've known Gene, when he was in social service and moved over to economic development as well, and hung out in his office when I was little. So that piece about having access, but also knowing the right questions to ask, knowing the right things to demand, and knowing what your rights are. And I think all of us are very adamant to make sure that the community members know what to ask, how to ask, and to stay steadfast in those requests so that they're at the table and know what the processes are so that they can retain ownership, right? So they're not looking through things through a rosy glass, say, oh, everything's gonna be all right. And then next thing they know, they're out on the street, pushed to another neighborhood 20, 30 miles away. And what's also known as gentrification, right? So that they get the fruits of the labor being at the table. And it's a legacy thing as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Wonderful, thank you all so much. And one thing, Gina, I heard you bring up as well as the idea of assets. And so we talked at the top of this about asset-based community development. And so Pastor Lynch, if I could come back to you now. And you're an early faculty with the ABCD Institute. Maybe you could share with us more about what is asset-based community development. What's that lens that you've been applying to this work? And you may even have a story of sort of the soft, I think you've talked about the soft side of ABCD, a story of an individual that has tapped into their own abilities and skills.
All right, ABCD, asset-based community development. We started at Northwestern University, where John McKnight and Jody Kretzman had written this book. And it's actually one of the best-selling community organizing, community development book ever written and ever sold. And so, I don't know, now probably 25, 30 years ago, I met John and Jody because I was with United Way here in Cincinnati, and we took a group to Chicago to meet them because our United Way, like every 5 years, tries to reinvent itself. Give out millions of dollars every year, raise millions of dollars every year, and see really minimal change in the community. So every year they bring in a group of people and say, hey, can you help us reinvent ourselves? Can you help us figure it out? We just raised $60 million and it's gone, and now we got to do it again, and there's no changes. So we heard about asset-based community development, which means acknowledging that communities are gifted, that people are gifted, that there are assets and resources. And the only way you're going to really build a community is by building from your strengths, as opposed to always trying to build from our weaknesses. So as Jean mentioned, no longer working in the social service area. Again, when I was in Over the Rhine, it was the most serviced community in the state of Ohio. Every social service agency you could think of in our city was in this one community. And at the same time, we were the worst community in the state of Ohio. So this idea that if you surround people with the right amount of services, they become whole, obviously was not true. It's a safety net, but it did not build community because we were only focused on the deficiency. We were only focused on the needs. We were only focused on the fact that people were broken. And now Over the Rhine is this gentrified community, and guess who's gone? Not just the people, social service providers are gone. Our drop-in center, you had to leave. Our city gospel mission, you're out. It was just so interesting to live through a transformation of a community. So people 20 years from now, they'll look at this as history. For us, it was lived experience. I watched how you literally take a community. And so, so when you're in the community and you've got, the drug problems and the crime or whatever, and you'll have community residents say, we need to take back our community. We need to take back our community. Well, all they mean is get the dope boy off the street. For them, that's it. That take back our community means if we can get the dope boy off the street, get the kids under control. When other people say we want to take back the community, they mean take the property.
Right.
They mean own the land. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to learn these lessons. They're right in front of our faces. So with ABCD, what we learned is that you have to fight with both hands. So I started out as a community organizer in the Alinsky style. I was trained in Miami, Florida to do community organizing, which means you organize people around their needs. You get their anger, you have your action, and who's the target? You got to have a target. You go after somebody. And I enjoy that too. But we're also gifted. And so when Jean mentioned the glass half full, half empty, this is important for everybody listening. The glass will never fill up by pouring into it.
Right.
I wish it did, because all the billions and millions of dollars we've spent on poverty and we've spent in these communities and we've spent on social services, if the glass would fill by pouring into it, we'd be great. The glass fills by expanding the capacity that already exists.
Right.
All right. So when you ask people, is the glass half full or half empty? Of course, the answer is yes, it's both. So we don't neglect the emptiness, but we acknowledge what's there and expand. And needs are best met inside of community. Community people are the best people to meet their needs. Right now in our city, we're talking about the crime problem. I just walked 5 miles on the major street in our city that they're going to be meeting tonight talking about pedestrian injuries and deaths. We've got people speeding on the street. I saw it today. It was unreal. I'm waving at people to slow down. But those efforts, community has to be engaged. They have to decide, how do we slow people down? How do we stop the violence? It's not going to be because City Hall doesn't have the answers, but community residents do. So that's what ABCD does. It acknowledges, it affirms, and it activates. It acknowledges the gifts, it affirms the gifts that are there, and then it activates. And then communities build and grow stronger.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. It's that inside out relational approach. I love it. Gene, I think you had your hand up.
No, I was just agreeing with Damon.
Yeah.
We just have all of these lessons that have been before us that we have to learn, that we can't do things the way we've always done it. If we're going to move the needle in terms of the economic and social conditions of people in communities predominantly of color.
I wonder if we could stick with you for a second, because you've done so much with the community empowerment group. You've mobilized congregations, entrepreneurs, just providing the working on that social infrastructure. What insight do you have on how do you mobilize people around what they care about to make a difference in their neighborhood?
Well, one of the things is, as you just mentioned, we have to find out the things that people care about. Too often, the process in social service agencies is somebody else determining what you need, what your problem is. And if they do that, then they've also predetermined what it requires in order to fix it. So engaging people and empowering people in addressing issues in the community is extremely important. And I work with the Collective Empowerment Group. It was a group of churches out of Prince George County, Maryland. They came together because churches would put money in banks on Monday and couldn't get a loan on Wednesday. Prince George County is one of the richest counties in this country. And so these churches came together and decided that they would select 3 banks to do business with. And they vetted these banks and made the selection of these 3 banks. And these churches then used those 3 banks only for their deposits, and they encouraged their members to use those banks as well. That created then a sense of empowerment around what happens with their money and the institutions that held their money. So here locally in Cincinnati, we took that same approach, but we added to it of bringing together, we now have about 50 businesses that are part of the organization. And we looked at those things that people purchase or services that they purchase and vetted these organizations. And now we focus our patronage on these businesses. By doing so, we are providing the services and the products that our members need, and also helping to build those businesses. By building those businesses, we create job opportunities. We begin to create wealth. As those businesses grow, we expand opportunity to possess more land, more property, and we build a community based on the desires of the community and with the input and support of those communities.
Jay has in the chat, he says, please tell us a story of one person unleashed through gift-oriented support. And I've got hundreds of those stories. But let me just share with Jay and everybody. A friend of mine named Peter Block, who lives here in Cincinnati, Peter always talks about the invitation, how important and powerful the invitation is. And I use that in my theology and in my sermon. I actually did a sermon on the woman at the well who met Jesus. And what's so interesting and crazy about that story is that after she met him, it says she ran in the town and told everybody about Jesus, and the whole town came back to see him. She shared her story. There was an invitation given. And on the flip side, though, Jesus' disciples had gone into the same town and brought back nobody. All they brought back was lunch. She went into town and brought back the whole town. The disciples went into town and brought back lunch that he didn't even eat. All right? There's power in the invitation. And the invitation is based on the fact that I need you. Some of the greatest words that I share with everybody in my congregation, in my community, I need you. I don't care how young you are, how old you are. Those are powerful words because now somebody realizes that they're powerful, that they're needed. All right. So when you share that, Kids love it. We have a summer camp going on here right now. I can go downstairs right now and tell 4 or 5 kids, I need you to help. And they get excited about that. I do that with everybody. The other thing, as I shared, is you have to acknowledge that everybody's gifted. When you look at, if you go to abcdinstitute.org, we've got stories from around the world about the people whose lives and communities have been changed. You acknowledge that. So what you say to people is, what's important to me about you is your gift. You look people in the eye, and what's important to me about you is your gift, because your gift is the key that unlocks the door to community. Your need gets you service, your need puts you in a caseload, your need allows you to stand in line and wait, but your gift unlocks the door to community. So with the stories, there's 2 that I love, and Eric mentioned Clint. Clint is the tuck pointer who tuck pointed the building that my office used to be in over the Rhine. I met Clint because Clint was panhandling. Clint came to me and asked me to give him $1 one day. I told him, no, I'm not giving away any dollars. We continued to talk. And at some point, Clint said, child, I like you. I was younger. He said, and today's been a good day. And he said, I probably have more dollars in my pocket than you do. I said, well, if give me $1's been working, you got a pocket full of dollars. I went pastoral because I was actually sitting on the steps of the church. I said, Clint, why don't you come to church? I went pastoral. Clint went deficient. Clint said, I'm an alcoholic. I said, oh, that's okay. We got alcoholics in church. There's room for alcoholics. No matter what I said, Clint was, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic is going to keep Clint out of church, but it did get him serviced in the community. So we would do that dance periodically till finally a friend of mine said, I know Clint. He said, Clint's a tuck pointer. I said, what's a tuck pointer? I didn't know. He said, they put the mortar back between the bricks of old buildings. I said, oh, I can't wait to see Clint again. We do the dance. Clint, when are you coming to church? I'm an alcoholic. I said, but I also heard you're a tuck pointer. And his eyes got huge. And he said, child, how did you know? He said, not only am I a tuck pointer, I'm the brick doctor, and nobody does brick like me. I gave Clint the job to tuck point the building. Now, every word I'm saying is important. I gave Clint the job to tuck point the building. I didn't go to the trustees of the church. I didn't go to the deacons, because if I had done that, they would have talked about insurance and liability and bonding. That's not what I'm trying to do. I didn't even care if the building got tuck pointed, to be honest, but I gave Clint the job to tuck point the building. He tuck pointed it, and the work was awesome. The next Sunday I stand up, guess who's sitting in church with a nice white shirt on? Clint the tuck pointer. But when Clint the tuck pointer comes to church, he brings with him Clint the alcoholic. You get it? His gift was the key that unlocked the door to community. It's the invitation. My secretary would tell you, a guy came down there, he had been stabbed in the arm with a screwdriver. Somebody tried to rob him. He came to the church for us to give him money for antibiotics. She's sitting up to my office. He comes in, he slouches down, gives me the saddest story you ever want to hear. Now remember, what's important to me about him is his gift. He's going to give me the deficiency, because we've all been taught and trained to do that. In order to unlock the services, I've got to tell you how needy and how bad I am. So I let him do that. Finally, I said, tell me what you do and what you do so well that somebody might pay you to do. He said, I lay floors. Now I'm impressed because I don't lay floors. I said, what kind of floors? He said, linoleum, hardwood, tile, you name it, I can lay it. And as he says that, he starts to sit up straight. And I'm watching this guy grow right in front of me. All right, so now he's not just the homeless guy who's been stabbed in the arm, he's the guy who has the ability to lay floors. At the end of the conversation, I sent him back downstairs for the secretary to do what she does, call CVS or whatever. He left, she called upstairs and asked me, she said, what did you do? So what do you mean, what did I do? Said he left here crying and said he had forgotten that he was a man. And it's just that simple. If you acknowledge I don't care how poor you are, I don't care what label you've given them, socially disadvantaged youth, at-risk youth, blah, whatever. Those are cool. That's the deficiency part, that we label people. Because for social services, if I can't label you, I can't help you. You can't come to my agents and say, I'm gifted. It's like, I don't know what to do with that. Tell me you're broke. Tell me you can't pay your rent. Tell me something bad so we can see what we do. So you acknowledge they're gifted, and then you have to affirm it. Clint, I didn't have to affirm. The tuck pointer, he said he's the brick doctor. This guy whose arm had been stabbed, I had to affirm him. So, right, if you lay floors, that is awesome. But then thirdly, you have to activate it. And so it's not just enough to acknowledge or to affirm, you have to activate. So it's real simple. If I go knock on doors right now, I can knock on doors and say, tell me, hi, Mr. Johnson, I'm from New Prospect, and we're doing a survey of the issues in the community. And I know it out here, crime, kids, blah, blah, out here, I already know. But if I say we're doing a capacity inventory, and I want you to take this list, and every time you see something that you love to do, like to do, just put a check. Can you cook for 25 people or more? Check. Just now I've got all this beautiful information so Mrs. Johnson, I can go back and say, we're doing a fish fry on Friday. If you could make some of those cookies for us, I would love it, because your gift is the key that makes you part of community. So those are the stories. And ABCD is about individuals, associations, and institutions. So everything that you've just heard me say about an individual, it's the same thing we do with an institution. You go to a church in your community and you just ask questions. Would you guys be willing to? And that's the question. And almost always the answer is yes. And would you be willing to question actually expands the capacity of that institution or organization. So if you're driving down the highway and says this part of the highway cleaned by the whomevers, I guarantee you, if you look at their mission statement, it doesn't say we clean highways, but somebody asked them, would you be willing to? Those are the powerful questions, and that's the invitation.
Yeah, and I want to also explore, if you would, with me for a little bit. Collectively, you start to build that inventory. What the gifts of the individual, the institutions, associations. Something that I feel is unique that the Cincinnati story is telling us, or that we can learn from. You talk about owning the land, and so you've really dug into neighborhoods at gifts at all levels, individuals such as Clint, associations, institutions, groups, but they also have a resource, which is the physical environment, the built environment, the natural capital of that neighborhood. I wonder if you care to share a little bit about this. You mentioned a little bit, whether it's the grocery store I know that you're working on, Gene, or I know, Pastor, you've got another whole block that you bought. But if you could share a little bit about that, and then I want to bring in Amber as well after that.
So we purchased a building from the community about 1.5 years ago. And the building used to be a grocery store, and then part of it had an office. When we purchased that building, moved our office into that building, and then we set out to develop, to reopen a grocery store. Bond Hill is a food desert, so there is food inequity that exists here. So we went about finding contractors, architects to design this building, looking at other models so that we can make sure that it's sustainable. And so right now we're in the process of construction, and it won't be just a grocery store. We're trying to make it a destination.
Excuse me, Gene, real quick, can you restate the name of the Community Development Corporation? Because you're saying we, but not everybody on here know who we is.
We is the Community Economic Advancement Initiative. And so the grocery store will also house an internet cafe, a coffee shop, and a commercial kitchen. We have a chef, Chef Anthony he teaches culinary arts for Don's School, which is primarily African-American school, charter school. He will also be teaching healthy cooking classes for people who live in the community. And that kitchen will be available for small caterers. So we're helping to build businesses as we create a space where people can purchase healthy food at a reasonable cost. That's just one of the projects that we're doing. We acquired a piece of property across the street from the grocery store, and we're going to build affordable housing on that lot. We purchased about 2 years ago 4 acres of land out literally behind Damon's church. And it held a single family house on it. We tore it down, and now we're building a 12-unit apartment building. It'll have 6 2-bedroom, 6 1-bedroom apartments there. And then in partnership with Damon and his church, we're going to build a senior citizens building on property they already own. So we are endeavoring to, we're possessing some land, we're developing the land, but we're also helping to grow businesses as well. So as Damon put it, we're putting a Black face on development. Our architects development, our contractors are developed, are African-American rather, and our marketing team, we've used all African-American businesses to help launch our programs and to see them through execution.
Wonderful. I see another comment came in asking for contact information. Thank you, Pastor Lynch, for sharing that. Really appreciate that. Clearly, these stories are resonating with our audience. Amber, I'd like to bring in, if you would, you in, and I know you're part of the Cooperative Extension Service, and I know it's just a part of it, but a part of that service is thinking about food. It's been mentioned so far today, ABCD, in a sense, fathered by John McKnight and Jody Kretzman. John McKnight's research is that neighborhoods can be producers of well-being, that they have a function, a role to play in society. And we've heard about how neighborhoods can play the role of building flourishing local economies. And part of that too is they can also be producers of their own food. And so I know that's part of what Extension does, but I don't know if you care to share a little bit about how you see the use, not sort of the reclamation, not just of the built infrastructure, but of the natural capital of Roselawn and Bond Hill.
Okay, so first let me back up, because I like to start with definitions first.
Yeah.
And let me kind of explain what, if that's okay, just a real high level what extension is, because we're in that space. So everybody, all the panelists know, but I don't know if the audience knows. So the federal government, through laws and regulations, establish certain universities to have what's called land grant extension. And it was based to improve processes in the agriculture industry and also to develop businesses. That has expanded to also include STEM, youth development, 4-H, as well as family and consumer sciences. For us that are a little bit older, that's the old home ec, and also health awareness, disparities, and things of that nature. And then community and economic development arm was later introduced. I am on the community and economic development arm at Central State University. So with all of that combination, our role in extension at Central State University is to partner with agencies like CEAI, with New Prospect Baptist Church, with individuals, communities, agencies, people who want to do urban farming, to work with the issues that we're talking about today, to help get rid of food deserts, to help augment what's already being done. It's not for us to come in and take over. It's for us to say, hey, what are you doing? Using that ABCD model, right? Is to come in and say, hey, what are you doing? We have some resources. How can we augment to make it better, to help you get to whatever your goals and aspirations are for your community? So that's why use us as a resource, right? And I look forward to working any opportunity that I get to work with Jean and Damon. So we get to do a lot of education pieces, and some of the other things that we're working are quality of life issues, because like you said, you can build the infrastructure, but if the people are not prepared or positioned to maintain and sustain it, then other people are going to take over, and then we're going to have gentrification again. So we at Extension also work on quality of life issues like record selling, teaching entrepreneurship, finding resources. There's sometimes grant monies, low income, low interest loan monies to do farming and business development kinds of things through USDA. And then we help navigate those waters because they can be complicated, right? We help simplify that and ease that access and get you connected to the right people. Because USDA has over 100 programs. So if you don't know where to go, you'll get lost, right? So that's part of our role to help eradicate the food deserts, to bring healthy foods to the area, and to help sustain what the community wants in the long term.
And Eric, if I can just say, we are just blessed to have Amber. I mean, so where she is, and she's done, even before she went to Central State, she was doing great work here in our city. So we're proud of her. She's just a beautiful asset. She is part of that. That's what asset-based community development is.
Yeah.
She's an asset.
Thank you.
Well,
That
so
means a lot coming from those two.
yeah,
And all the energy she brings to this work is just absolutely great.
so and maybe we could do that. Amber, I'll ask one last question, then we're going to open up for questions. But you know, as I think about who is in the audience, you know, they're asking for contact information, all that. This is resonating. But there may be people who aren't as far down the road as you are in really living into this asset-based community development framework. And so maybe starting with you, Amber, since you're such an asset, but then also, of course, I'll open it up for Pastor Lynch and Jean. What would be your, you know, the top things that you would say, hey, focus on this or start here? Well, what would you say to a neighborhood on this journey?
Well, I would say contact any of us because we're here to listen to see even what you want to do. And then we begin strategizing what your next steps would be, you know, and working with you to determine what those next steps would be. But you have to start and plan and map it out. You can't just have the protest without a plan. You know, when you go back to the collaborative agreement, I was kind of in a unique position because I was there at the planning meetings for the collaborative agreement, but we were also doing focus groups to make sure that the community was informed and knew what the next steps were. But my dad was the ombudsman for the police department, so he was an assistant police chief, and he was walking the community. He was out in the community despite what his police chief, his boss, was saying not to do. He was still out in the community. And there was a curfew, so I had to take my dad food. I didn't see my dad other than taking him food for about 3 weeks, right? But so I got to see both sides of the coin, but that's part of my family legacy, that we're part of the community no matter what your role is. So it's listening to the community, and he took that feedback that he got in the community, and he made sure that the community had a voice at the table from the police side, and that helped bring the brass to the table, because he was demanding it despite the pressure for him to be quiet for the collaborative agreement. So I got to kind of see both sides of that. And the key to that is listening and having those tough conversations, even when people don't agree, and building that common ground. Because at the end of the day, we all want peace, right? And we want prosperity, and people might want to get their different ways, but you have to listen. So the starting point is to be able to listen and to start with people who you have 3 resources right here. Come to us and we can tell you how to get started. We've been in the trenches, we've been on the front line. We're not afraid to go to some of the other decision makers, right? And you know, Iris Rowley is another person to go to start those conversations and get to where you need to be. So that's where I would say to start.
And,
Well, and on that, you did have a request for your contact information, so
I'll type it in there now.
at CEAI, we spent probably, maybe 5 to 6 months doing the strategic plan, and we brought some of the, you know, some thought agents together from various perspectives, and we sat in the room at Damon's church for about, you know, over a 6-month period of time, developing a strategic plan, and not just genuflexing to a crisis, we sat down with some forethought and planning to determine what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do it, and what we needed in order to make it happen.
It's important for everybody to understand, though, all is not well in Cincinnati. I mean, we're not utopia, we're not perfect, and this work costs. And I don't mean monetarily. I mean physically, mentally, spiritually. When Amber talked about her dad standing up, he paid for that. He paid a price for that. I've paid a price in this city. Gene has paid. We pay a price to do this work. You know, everybody's not happy with what we're doing. So, you know, what's important is you just have to be committed to it. You have to almost be called to this, which is a word we use in our churches. You got to be called to it.
Yep.
Pastor Lynch, I wonder if you could respond. Jay references here, begin with treasure hunting, making the invitation. That's his suggestion for a starting place. Your reflection on that?
Yeah, well, I think it begins with the mindset. As I've said, you have to see, you have to acknowledge that as I said, acknowledge, affirm, and activate. Those are the three things. It's the mindset. So that's so ingrained in me that it's hard for me to fall back into a deficiency mindset, deficiency mode. You know, I just did this walk through the community. All I saw was opportunity. Where other people might see blight, I'm like, oh, sure, this one. I'm like, I just see opportunity. I see opportunity for jobs, you know, businesses. I saw a lot of it. It's the mindset. You know, when I pass people on the street, I speak to them because I recognize that this is a person. You're not invisible. And that's one of the things that plagues our communities, that people feel invisible. Just from the simple, you know, you walk into a store and there's a bunch of guys standing out in front of the store and you know, I guess you're afraid, but you don't even acknowledge that they're there. So what, I'm invisible?
Right.
So I don't allow people to be invisible. You know, I don't allow people to just tell me how bad things are. I know they're bad. You know, let's talk about what we can do to fix it.
Yeah, there were some drug dealers across the street from where our store is going to be located. And people kept asking, what are you going to do about the drug dealers? What are you going to do about the drug dealers? So I'm not going to do anything about the drug dealers. We're going to embrace them. We're going to develop a relationship with them. And they became my security force. They was like, don't worry about, we're going to look after your property. And so that's just a start, the open to the relationship. So our goal is hopefully we can help them find other means of being able to sustain themselves. But to ostracize them because of what they do, that's not our role. We want to embrace all people in our community. And so, you know, they just become a part of our mission, a part of our work, without trying to denigrate them in the process.
So yeah, if I can say this, because I don't want to forget it. I would challenge everybody to go to YouTube and pull up Dr. King's last Sunday sermon. Not his last sermon, that's the one the day before he was killed, but pull up Dr. King's last Sunday sermon. Listen to the entire thing. It is powerful. I think he was at the Canterbury. But if you don't want to hear the entire thing, go 27 minutes in when he starts talking about poverty. And he does a masterful job talking about poverty and tying it to the story of Lazarus and Dives in the Bible. I was blown away by it. So it's Dr. King's last Sunday sermon. Listen to the whole thing if you can while you're driving. And if not, just go to the 27-minute mark and listen to how he deals with poverty in America.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Well, I know I'll be listening. And thank you also, all of you, for your time. We're coming close on to our hour. And I want to throw up a couple of things in the chat for you. And then we'll take, we looks like another question in the chat, so we'll take that, and that's how we'll wrap up. If what you've heard today is pulled on your heartstrings and you really want to contribute to the ongoing Cincinnati story, what's happening in Roselawn and Bond Hill and beyond, we're going to throw up the address for the Community Economic Advancement Initiative. And if you're welcome to send a check and designate it to their equity fund. And that's a way to keep this work progressing. And then if you want to see this newer neighborhoods to continue the journey toward, I know not all as well in Cincinnati, but you are farther advanced than some. And if you want to be a part of contributing toward new neighborhoods, moving their way forward using asset-based community development, you can also give to Great Lakes Urban. And we'll throw that in the chat as well. And so we are trying to incubate we have about 9 neighborhoods that we support directly or indirectly as they move in this journey toward where Roselawn and Bond Hill are currently. So that's an opportunity. And we'll come back now to a final question that's in the chat, and then we'll wrap things up. And first of all, I'll note here that Monica says thank you again to the panelists. So thank you so much. This has been super insightful. Someone asked, what's an example of an ABCD approach to gentrification if a community identifies this as a priority?
Yeah, I would say go again to our website, abcdinstitute.org. There's so much material there. One of the things you can pull up, and it's free, is a faith-based book on asset-based community development. There's the one on rural asset-based community development, and there's stories from around the country. So I'm sorry, around the world actually. There's some powerful stories in Ethiopia. So that's where I would start. It's just peruse the website and just get all that information. You can go to the Cody Institute, which is in Canada, that does excellent work as well. So their stories, and I love Mary Nelson's story out of, I'm forgetting it now. Eric, you know Mary's story. Bethel
New Life.
New Life. Yeah, if you want to see true community revitalization using ABCD, Bethel New Life story.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Again, thank you for those resources. Any last words of advice, Dean, Amber?
All I can say is, as any community or group that you're a part of, you have the power to make change. And so many times people say, I don't have a gift, they're not a tuck pointer, they're not this vocational gift, but your voice is your strongest gift. And if you have that, you have the ability to motivate and help and be at that table to decide what you want to have done in your community. And that's the strongest gift of all. So, and just use us, talk to us to start that journey to retain ownership and to grow your community.
Great.
I'm sorry, Pastor Lynch.
And thank you for letting me talk before the pastors.
No, I just said I agree with what Amber said.
I was going to say what she said.
Yeah. Ditto. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to all that are listening in. I do want to note that if you want to stay in touch with us, please do so. We do have a contact page where you can, that'll take you to our Facebook, our LinkedIn, and you can sign up for our newsletter. We will be posting this recording to those that registered, and as well, we'll put it on our blog site. That's been dropped in the chat as well. But do sign up for the newsletter so you can keep in touch with future opportunities. These Lunch and Learns happen quarterly. There's other stuff that happens. There's ABCD trainings and other things happening between them. But these are ways that we can help to share the story about neighborhoods can be and must be, for the sake of our nation, these units of change that are able to live into their role as producers of well-being. And so with that, I will wrap things up. Thank you again so much to everyone that participated. Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you so much, Pastor Lynch. You all have really had an impact on myself and learned greatly, and I think on our audience.
Thank you
So
so
with
much.
that, we'll wrap things up, and have a good day to everyone.
Thank you.
Amen.